Everybody's got an opinion.
This is the quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
We live in a world of opinionaires.
If that means you're a hack, be proud of it.
You know, that's what I call them, opinionaires.
You're the king of the forest. What?
You fucking trailer? Brothers to the bone, right, McMasters?
Period. Hacks.
This podcast was almost called Fully Charged because it's like whatever is angering me.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I'll be your therapist.
Right. That's right. So that's why I started naming you MamDanny because
that's the MamDanny.
I
love communism.
Okay, so that's the difference. It's not. This is why I need you to explain to me because it's not communism.
Okay, here we go.
You're right. This is where it goes because okay, let me give you my breakdown, my understanding as a layman.
Yes.
To put it in the nicest terms.
Yes.
Socialism, they want to spread wealth among everyone. But this is how I see it. It's like being in a group. It's like being in a group project.
Okay.
And I want to be in the group with the smartest person because I don't want to do any work.
Well, okay, so
that's kind of how I see socialism.
Yeah, I can explain it to you, but the thing is, on this stuff is why I don't like politics per se.
And not every episode is going to be politics. This one just happened to be like
I don't mind
pretty
talking
big.
about it, but the thing is, it's actually these things are. This is when the more I talk about it and I talk to people and my students and faculty members, like no one understands this stuff. And if you look at, even I bought. There's 2 books here. I bought the critical race theory book. I bought in like the last few weeks. I've bought like so many books.
Have you read them? Have you read those books? Or you
no,
just
they're in my waiting list. Like for instance, I was reading. So this is a sec. If you've never read, which you should read. So like or you can with you audiobooks. All these stuff are usually, especially if they're older books, they're on YouTube. So you can be driving to work and listening to this.
Yeah.
Okay. So everyone should read. This is John Stuart Mill. So everyone should read John Stuart Mill. It's a book. It's like college typical book you get in college. I have like 15 versions. I literally have 15 versions of this book. It's On Liberty is the one you want to read. Okay. But it has other things in here. So On Liberty, when you read it, is from 1853, I think, or when I looked it up the other day. It's like he's talking about right now. So that's one. So what does that mean in terms of the socialism stuff? So the more you read the different views, so I think there is a thing called liberal socialism. Okay, I've read that in another book, in this book. If I can probably find it.
I don't need you to find it.
But there's liberal socialism, okay?
Okay.
So if you're a liberal and you believe in individualism, then you aren't necessarily opposed to socialism, okay?
I'm not opposed to all. I like social aspects.
I'll explain it to you, but it depends on what you mean. Like we use the word like liberal is a word that gets used often, and people would go like my students would go, "Oh, Barack Obama's a liberal and Trump's not," but that's like a modern term, right? That's like we go, "Oh, that's a liberal, that's a conservative," okay?
Right.
But liberalism, I will use capital L. Other people like using small l. I'll use capital L because to me it's like an idea. So I give it like more things can go underneath it. Is about individualism. So in my view, and people would disagree because it's like names. It's like Pokemon cards. Everyone has a little different way of playing. You're saying the same basic thing. That in individualism, so John Stuart Mill, like I just showed you, was very much for like you can tell he read the American founders. He's very much about for individualism. And he's worried about the tyranny of the government. Right? Like, it's kind of like a modern American Republican libertarian. Oh, the government's bad. Okay. But the thing that makes it very American, or he's British and more modern, is that liberals are not just worried about the tyranny of the government. They're worried about the tyranny of their neighbors, of everyone else. So the tyranny of the majority, right? Like public opinion and things like that, and the tyranny of the government. So liberals, because they're focused on their individual, they're not egoists. Because you're a father, so you have a family and a wife, right? So you're an individual, but you also like in your individual life have these other important parts to your life, right? Does that make sense? Okay. An egoist, someone's like an egoist is like, no, it's just me. That's the difference between an egoist and a liberal. Liberal's more political, egoism's more ethical, but an egoist would just go like, everything is important about me. I don't care about anyone else. And liberals don't think that. Right? They're like, well, individuality is important, but I can choose to be a part of a group. I can choose to be a part of a public organization, right? But like you can opt in and opt out. So like for instance, many people are religious, so they choose to go into a church or leave it and change their mind or become an atheist and go back, right? So they're making individual choices, but they're choosing to be part of a group. Okay. So in liberalism, one of the key kind of like famous, like no one would disagree, I don't think, liberal freedoms, liberties, right? You're at liberty to choose is freedom of religion. Make sense?
Yeah.
Because now I can choose a religion on my own or not, but you're choosing to be part of a group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still waiting to get to.
I know. We gotta get the background. So John Stuart Mill was a liberal socialist. So here's the socialist part. Socialism generally is usually taught from like a Marxist perspective because he's the most famous, and it's basically it comes from another line of European philosophy called republicanism. And in republicanism, public life is more important than individual life. Does that make sense?
Say it again.
Public life is more important than individual life.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That's what socialism is. Yeah.
Well, no, because I just told you, John Stuart Mill's a liberal socialist. So you can be a liberal socialist, or I guess you could be a Republican socialist. So here, republicanism means what's best for society, what's best for the collective. That's the way we learn it. So we learn it from a juxtaposition, but even the terms need not be opposing. You can be a liberal. You can be both a socialist and a liberal, or more Republican and liberal. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense, but also, okay, just keep going.
For instance, okay. So this is the political ideology behind the political framework. So the ideology matters because the way in which you interpret the world and make prescriptions and proscriptions, prescriptions are things to do and proscriptions are things not to do. Does that make sense? Will change depending on what your end goal is. If you're trying to improve individual life, you'll do X. If you're trying to improve collective life, you'll do Y. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But you can also have the two different beliefs, but come into agree on the same thing, but for different reasons. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so for instance, here's a typical kind of socialistic thing that could be liberal if you're John Stuart Mill, or more, I guess we'll call it left-wing if you're Karl Marx. Okay, ready? Public education. So when these guys are writing this stuff in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, there's no conception of public education, right? It's like Little House on the Prairie. A school marm comes to town. The people of the town decide to pay the school marm to teach, first through sixth grade. Teach them how to read, all in the same classroom. Does that make sense? Okay, but that's not the best way of doing it. So if you're a liberal like John Stuart Mill, who's a liberal socialist, he goes, I will argue that every individual in the society, if they were being honest, could agree. So that agreement makes a system legitimate. So non-coercion. They will agree to pay for the public education. Okay, but that means that when the government takes your taxes, which takes your property, it's actually legitimate for a liberal because you've agreed, or a liberal socialist because you've agreed to it. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. We'll just say now Marxarian socialism. So for Marx, socialism is an intermediate step from capitalism to communism. Marx doesn't actually really talk about communism. Okay. And the way you're talking about it and the way we now use it because of reasons, the Cold War, when you hear the word socialism, we already link it to Marx. Like I said, it need not be Marx, but that's how we think about it. So,
well, that's who MamDanny is.
Well, I know.
He takes the Marxist viewpoint, not what's the other guy's name? What's this other guy's name?
John Stuart Mill. So
I think it's John Stuart.
That most socialists in the world are probably informed by Marx. So what's the difference? The Marx version that kind of comes from Rousseau. So this guy wrote like in the 1750s, and Marx is writing like 100 years later, right? That view is that if the society gets a hold, and we'll use Marxist language, gets a hold of the means of production, then they'll be more democratic, but to be true Democrats, you also need a redistribution of wealth because you have to be on the same money page to an extent. Why? Who's the most influential people in our society? Would you say?
Rich.
Exactly. If you have money, you're just going to have a disproportionate political say because you can pay for these things. So, to have effective socialism in this view, you have to control those things and the economics and the money distribution so that you get to everyone deciding what's best for society. So do you think a society would think public education is good for a society?
Yes.
Yes, but now the difference would be like with socialized medicine or all these different things. the problem is going to be, well, who's making these determinations? Like, who determines who gets an education? So, for instance, European societies, from my understanding, are not Marxist, but they're closer to this more Republican vein, so they seem Marxist. Oftentimes in those societies, I don't know which ones, Scandinavia, you have to take a test to go to college. It doesn't matter if your family has the money or if you're willing to work to do the money. If you don't pass the entrance exam, then they don't let you into college, because you basically said, like, you've proven that you're not going to make the best use of your college education because you didn't pass the test. That's why many of those people come to what country do you think to get an education?
Well, they come here. I was friends with a lot of them.
Exactly. Perfect. Well, perfect. Here's my point. So why do people from other countries come to America? One, we have great schools, generally speaking. But two, if you have enough money, especially with the private schools, they'll let you in. It doesn't matter if you don't test well. It doesn't matter, because sometimes people do better later in life, or you make mistakes or this or that. So because our society is more liberal, we go, you have the individual freedom because you have money to choose if you want to go to college. In more Republican style political ideologies, which is more in Europe, which leads you to socialism, they're like, no, you didn't pass the test, so you don't get to go to school. You see? So they argue that's best for society because only the smartest people go to college, right? They're going to make the most of it. But the American view, which is more liberal, is like, yeah, but who knows? Like, some people are late bloomers. Some people don't test well. It's all up to the individual, right? If the individual wants to burden themselves with debt, which happens to a lot of Americans, and they make a mistake, that's on them. So America is much more about winners and losers, right? Because, like, you can make a mistake. Like, even I almost made a mistake. You have debt. We have a lot of debt, but we chose to do that, right? So from an American perspective, that's on us. From a more Republican perspective, it's like, no, because we don't want people to be burdened with debt. And that way we just, like, we limit their possibilities, their freedom to choose to make bad mistakes. But then we optimize what's best for society by giving the best people the education. So we have things that are socialized. So socialism generally means, in the practical context then, without the ideology like I place in America, that the government, which is supposed to work on behalf of the people via elections like MamDanny, will be in charge of things that affect people's lives, which in the Marxist terms would be the means of production. So I know the one thing I follow from him, public grocery stores, meaning the government will open up grocery stores, and according to him, which probably won't happen, the taxpayer monies will subsidize the food. And then when you sell the food, instead of there being a profit margin, like when you go to Albertsons or Walmart, right, they make 30 cents on everything they sell, let's say, you would be 30 cents cheaper on all the things you buy because the store would not be operating for profit. It would just cover its costs. Sounds actually pretty reasonable, right? But then the problem is, like, the disagreement becomes like, well, how efficient is government? Or, because government, like the DMV, right? Like they're not a for-profit organization. So, like, how they, with food, there's a service thing. So these are like these classic arguments that I don't know. I mean, okay, well, even still, say, okay, stop there, because then I'm like, say a car needs an engine, right, to move. Yes. To me, it sounds like socialism needs capitalism, because if everyone is the same, then who is making money? Who's because to me, capitalism grows innovation. It makes people want to work. Like, there's nobody going to work. There's no one going to work and be like, I'm going to stay here for years and I'm not going to get a raise. Or like, I'm going to do this, the hardest job in the world, and you're only going to pay me $20,000. So these are just disagreements. I tend to agree with you. I'm biased, but if you go from the Marxist logic to move from capitalism to socialism, which is like this intermediate phase where you're making it more communistic, right? And then you get to communism.
What's the difference? Is it communism just saying?
Communism is the
socialism is a distribution, but communism is the government saying you have to do it this way, like forcing you to do it this way.
Turning public. Socialism is the slow turning of private organizations, like an electric company, like a car company, like a grocery store chain. It's the changing that from the shareholders at Walmart and the shareholders at Exxon to the government. The government, so often this happens in Venezuela and these places. The government takes over these things and they become government run in the name of the people. Okay. So socialists first think that, like I told you, remember, liberals like worried about the government and the people. Okay. I would say like a Republican oriented socialist thinks that it's capitalism and the state and the culture that corrupts the people. And if the people are inherently good, this is again where you start to Americans should roll their eyes, because Americans don't think people are good, and Americans think, or American culture, let's say, also thinks that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So just because a person even means well, like let's say they are a legitimately good person, right? That such a person has limited knowledge, and like they can't see the future. And so even if I mean well, I would say what's a good example? Even if someone means well, they can cause bad things, if that makes sense. So maybe example, the best example might be to say penicillin. So the guy who invented penicillin saved a lot of lives, but the more and more we've given out penicillin over the last 100 years, guess what's happened to penicillin? It's not working anymore. And it seems like it's making some diseases more stronger, right?
That's funny. You went to that example, and my example would have been to stop for a cat on the road, and then you cause it for a car crash.
Well, no,
you
right,
had good intentions,
too, but
and then you went like a serious one.
Right. But
penicillin was a good one.
We acknowledge the same point. So that's very liberal. That's very American. That even if you're good, you have bad consequences could happen. So you make decisions for yourself. So like you're always accountable. That's kind of the liberal view. However, this kind of, we'll call it again, Marxist leaning socialism is the idea that no, people are good. It's the system that corrupts people. It's greed and capitalism. And so if the people become in charge of the government, it becomes more democratic. And then the government, right? So it's like the people, the government, and then the government's in charge of like the important capitalistic infrastructure. It turns it into like for the social, right?
But in socialism, instead of going after money and greed, isn't the main goal power? And then
not from their perspective.
They just want power.
Not from their perspective. So their perspective is that it's democratic, right? Because in the same way our system works, if the government doesn't run the companies well, we would vote for new people that would run the companies well, right? So the idea is that, like, even if you want power in the literal sense, like lights, that everyone needs the lights to work. Everyone needs sanitation to work. Everyone needs the farms to work, right? So it's not in the interest of the government to screw that stuff over, because then they also wouldn't have power. They also wouldn't have food. So the socialistic view is that people apparently are smart enough and can do and manage all these things in this kind of democratic way. And then the idea is that over time, as more and more parts of the capitalistic world become socialized, become open for like democracy. So like, for instance, let's say we socialize the car industry, right? So now we're going to say the government's going to run the car industry. And let's say it's like a more of a democracy like California. So then someone in California goes, I want to put a proposition on the ballot. I want to take it to the people about how we're going to run this car company. Do we want this car company to run on gasoline engines that pollute? And then you have the people who are for and against gasoline engines. Like, it's going to cause climate change and this and that. Or do you have the people who go, I want our car company now only to make hydrogen cars or only to make hybrid cars? You see? And so that would be the type of thing that from a socialist perspective would be up for democratic vote. Like, okay, yeah. So then we vote, and then we're telling the car company, who would still have their own like government work. Like we don't tell people what to do in the Department of Forestry, right? Like they go check the fishing like they do their own thing, right? But we tell them.
So communism, you wouldn't get to vote.
Well, that's socialism.
Technically, in socialism, you still would get to vote.
Yeah, and communism too. So as more and more things become socialized, and these big important things like energy and all these different programs, right? All the things that we need from the socialist perspective is that it'll eventually turn into communism, because communism actually means there's no state. So there's no hierarchical government. So it would be hyper democratic. So does that make sense? It's like you're turning capitalism, and they call this transitional phase from capitalism to communism, socialism. And as you make everything more and more socialized for the society, social society, it becomes the community making decisions about the economic and political infrastructure. So then it becomes social for the society.
Like China, I thought that's why they call it the state. The state owns everything.
Yes. Well, okay. So this is another classic problem. So the more I've studied this, I would argue that, and this is how I'm teaching this literally right now. So this is how I teach it. That when you meet a Marxist we'll just say a Marxist, when they say the state, like I'm telling my students right now, think of capital S state. It's a technical term. It doesn't mean the same thing because they see the world differently. they don't see the world or the state the same way as a liberal, we'll call them a liberal Democrat, like an American, right? So liberal capitalist, we'll call it liberal capitalist. A liberal capitalist doesn't see the world the same way. So why? A liberal capitalist sees two spheres of human life, right? I just told you they take priority on individual choice. So we call the individual choice realm the private sphere. Does that make sense? So the religion you pick is in your private life, or we call that the private sphere. Did you buy that? How you raise your kids is in the private sphere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The partner you pick, that's in your private life. All these things, we call it your private life, right? If you open a business for yourself, we call it a private business, right? Okay. So then anything that deals with the public or the society is usually run by the government. And we call those things like public programs, public housing, right? We call public. So there's the public sphere, which is more like the realm of government. Make sense?
Yeah.
And then there's the private sphere, which is the individual. Make sense?
Yes.
So in the public sphere, usually the government is trying to make decisions that benefit everybody, right? And so in liberal capitalist societies, that's where we have conflicts. So for instance, the government decides it needs to build a road, but your house is in the way. So now there's a conflict between public interest and your individual private interest. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So you understand there's two spheres of life. So for instance, a classic place where Americans argue about the government being involved in their life or the public sphere coming into the private sphere is two famous areas. Education, because even though you're sending your kids to a public school, our society is more liberal in orientation. And so if you don't want your kids to learn about transgenderism or creationism or flat earth, the government tries to create a curriculum that's pretty neutral that everyone agrees to as best as they can.
Well, they used to. Yeah.
Well, no, this is the thing. It's always there's always bias.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No. But we argue about what's neutral because 100 years ago, teaching prayers in school was considered very normal, right? Even though it was biasing towards Christians. Now, it's a different thing. It's like, oh, well, like there are gay people. You don't want your kids to not know that there's gay people, right? Not every white person. That seems like a public interest. It doesn't say like it's not just because your school teaches about homosexuality doesn't mean it's like, well, you should be gay, right? They could do that. But they could just go like, oh yeah, there's people who are gay, there's people who are straight, and like here's a famous gay person, or here's a famous civil rights leader who was gay, right? Like if you're learning about civil rights, you would learn about that. So you can see how it gets very tricky very quickly. Because if you're a very fundamentalist, you might go, Christian fundamentalist, I don't want my kids learning about any gay stuff. But you're like, yeah, but person X we're not talking about their sexuality, we're talking about as a civil rights leader. See? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's a public-private conflict. Because even though you're sending your kids into the public, there's things you don't want the public to teach your kids. Okay. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So because we have two distinct realms, public and private in a liberal capitalistic society. Marxists don't think that. There is no distinction between public and private. That makes no sense to them. So their capital as state, as compared to a liberal capitalist, is a better way of thinking about when they say state or a social, like MamDanny says state, they mean culture. They mean everything. They mean the social life, political life, and economic life. I'll give you for instance in a second. So when you generally meet an American person who's more right of center, when they say the state, like, oh, the government's being racist or the people, like society's racist, they mean there's a law on the books that says segregate against people X, right? If you get rid of that law from the state, or the way they usually mean the state is the government, right? So the law says be racist. If you get rid of a racist law, then the state is no longer racist. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now you'll notice the libs and people who are left of center, who are closer culturally to the socialists, go like, that's not how racism works. Racism is an idea. I need to put representation in media so that little brown girls see a brown hero on a Disney show, and then they'll go, oh, I'm as important as a white man, right? That's how they think of the state. But that's not how most people think of the state. That's why they think those things are big deals, and normal people roll their eyes about like, why is there another queer black Disney, make her lame and gay from South Park. But for those types of people, they envision the state as culture. So for Marx, another example of this in socialism is religion. Most of us, like I said, would think of the public and private sphere as the separation of religion or the separation of church and state. See how state means like the government? That's not how Marx means it. For Marx, the state is held up by religion. I'll give you an example. So in Marxism, he thinks that most of us are wage slaves and we should revolt and have a revolution against the people that own the means of production. He calls these people the bourgeoisie. Why wouldn't people do that? Well, he has this term called false consciousness. We're basically brainwashed. Well, what are the things in culture that brainwash us, right? He thinks that these rich people who own things also create culture. So for instance, like who pays for endowments for an art school? Who builds the universities? Who pays for a Hollywood movie? Rich people. So if you make a Hollywood movie that doesn't do these things, right, then they're not going to pay for it. So religion, for instance, if you go to like the Vatican, is like this, it's beautiful, it's ornate, there's marble and gold and it's everywhere, right? Well, someone paid for that. The church, the people paid the church to build this building. Okay?
Yeah.
So then from Marx's perspective, especially Christianity, brainwashes people to believe that that God exists. So he's an atheist. And because God exists, there's this place called heaven. And heaven is the best thing ever. And conveniently, and I even use Jimmy as Jimmy knows the story. It's not my dad's story. But Jimmy, I'll tell you a story from Jim. I tell my students. So stealing is wrong, right? Is stealing a sin as far as you remember growing up?
Yes.
Does it matter? Perfect, right?
Yes.
So does it matter who you steal from? Is God going to care if you're a Christian?
Yes, God would care. Yes.
Right. It's no sense.
Doesn't care if you're Robin Hood or
like stealing's wrong.
Stealing's wrong.
Oh, but I didn't. That guy was mean. That doesn't matter. Stealing's wrong. If you do enough sins, where do you go?
Down.
You go to hell.
Go to the elevator.
Right. So you get this
going
education
down
as a child. You
Boop.
listen to sermons. They go, hey, if you're good, you go to heaven, even if your life sucks. And the church tells you, oh yeah, little kids get cancer and all these bad things happen. But if you just keep the faith and behave morally, you'll go to heaven. So everyone goes, oh, hallelujah, brother. Like we're going to go to heaven. Okay. For Marx, this makes no sense. Why would you do that? Why, if someone were imprisoning you or if someone was stealing from you, you can't steal your stuff back. So for instance, if someone was going to kill you, what would you do?
I would try to kill them first.
You would kill in self-defense, correct?
I would like to think so. I might just curl up in a ball and die.
So you don't think it's morally wrong. You think you're allowed to defend yourself, right?
Yes. Yeah.
If someone was stealing food from your daughter, would you take the food back?
I would do more to them.
Exactly. But if you're living a Christian lifestyle, you would turn the other cheek. You would go, oh, well, if someone stole things from my family, they must need it more than me.
I'm
right?
out of cheeks, bro.
Right. So that's like the virtuous person. So for Marx, he's like, well, religion's brainwashing you. And then write this too. It's very Catholic. Does God know when you steal or sin? Does God always know?
He does.
Right. So the idea is that there's always someone watching you. Right. So even when you steal and no one's around or you take things that don't belong to you, God knows. Right. So the idea is that if you're in the situation where you could take stuff that you need, you won't do it because God sees what you're doing. So Marx thinks this is false consciousness because there is no God. It's just the material world. And so you produce culture and plays and stories and the Bible, and it convinces people like, oh, like this is part of the state. So now you have a bunch of people that there are laws on the books that say don't steal stuff, and they have a belief from culture to not steal stuff. So when they're in a store and they need medicine or they need basic things, even if they're suffering, Marx's point is they won't steal it. They won't revolt. They won't turn against the owners because they've been brainwashed to not steal things from rich people who wouldn't even notice it, right? They're not even going to notice it, but you can't even steal the silverware to feed your starving family, okay? And then if there are even people that would steal, which there are, who's there to stop them? The police. Or who gets them in trouble? Who do the police for? They work for the government. They're agents of the state. So even though normally most people wouldn't connect religion with the police, Marx is, right? It's like two different things that get you to the same goal. Either brainwashing people not to steal or revolt against the system, right? Like your day will come. It'll be better in the afterlife. So it means you have to wait till you're dead to, right? Yeah. Or if you do challenge the kind of cultural narrative, right? Because so for instance, like for us, what would you think of someone who didn't work, who could work? What would you think of that kind of person? They just don't
could work but didn't?
Yeah, they just live in their mom's basement. They're 40 years old.
Yeah, you're a bum. You're a bum.
That's the brainwashing, right? Maybe they don't have skills that the society want that value. Like maybe they are a hardworking person, right? But we're brainwashed to think like, oh, they're a bum, right? Like they're just a loser. Or again, what would you think of someone who stole things who didn't really need to steal?
I don't think they're a loser.
Yeah,
they are a loser.
Well, you're brainwashed. That's what the Marxists would say.
Let me get this right. Let me get this straight, buddy.
Yeah,
they are losers.
Oh, well, I'll be the resident Marx. I'm MamDanny.
Okay.
No, they're not losers, right? They're actually very brave people. They're revolutionaries. They're going against the system. They have more courage than you because all the system is telling you to do, like for instance, like it's very romanticized, and I think you actually live this lifestyle. Get up at 3 a.m., grind your ass off. It sucks. You know it sucks. You have all this stress. You have ulcers. You have all these things. You come home, wife, all these different
Let me
things.
put my medical history out of there.
No, I'm just saying, like, this is what happens, right? You get overweight, you kill yourself, you're eating while you're working, you're doing all these different things. And then what do you tell yourself at the end of the day? It's for my kids. I'm doing it for my kids. But all from a Marxist perspective, all you're doing is you're not helping your kids. You're helping your kids get to a situation exactly like you. Do you want your kids to live the lifestyle you live and get up at 3 a.m. and work all hard and work all these jobs and pull 22-hour shifts sometimes from 3 different jobs? Is that what you want for your children?
I'm not answering that question.
Okay, well, I'm going to say no. Because if I had children, I wouldn't want that. But then all you're doing is you're suffering through this system that's going to enslave your children and make them suffer. So if you actually had courage, you would break the rules. You would start to revolt. You'd be like our hero, my hero, Hassan Piker, because it's like I would spread the good word. And so it does take on a religious character, but it's fighting against it's fighting against this brainwashing. So that's where like someone like MamDanny is kind of like a proper socialist. And so the difference between like, which I think is bullshit, but he's a democratic socialist of America. It's a American political party. Is that instead of like there being a revolution or the government just becoming socialistic, like in Venezuela, right? Their whole thing of like is a legitimate form. So they'll vote to take over these things, right? So they'll vote for the people that take over private business. So for instance, going back to, I always like religion is a good example because Marxists are anti-religious.
Yeah, but even still going back to where we're at right now, it's like they want to do what's best for society, but society is made up of individuals. So if individuals don't want to see it though. But if individuals don't want to do what's best for themselves, then what makes you think they're going to do what's best for the society as a whole? That doesn't make any sense to me. That's what doesn't make any sense.
You have a different view, but you're very brainwashed. You're just very liberal. You're very liberal capitalistic. Okay.
Well, and I'm also dumb.
Hold on. Did you get a public education?
I did.
Is there anyone you know pretty much who didn't get a public education?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do you think you should be able to send your children to school? I don't know if you have a lot, you know.
Yeah.
Sure. Are you going to send your kids to public school?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what kind of school your parents went to?
Public.
Okay. So that's a lot of like socialized education there. Like everyone.
Well, that's what I said. I don't mind it. Certain social aspects.
Okay. Hold on. So that's education. We all buy into, right? So it's possible. We can all pretty much buy into socialized education. So there's a point for the socialist. You're not even arguing against it. Okay. Does everyone get sick?
Yes.
Is everyone going to die?
Yes.
Okay. So then if everyone needs an education, health seems like a bigger deal. So it sounds like what you're saying is like everyone should at least be entitled to health care.
Yes.
We all get sick, right? It's rich people, poor people, right?
Yeah.
Is a sick person who's rich more important than a poor person getting sick, morally speaking?
No.
They're equally human. So human. Okay, there you go. So now we should have socialized medicine. See how easy this is? Okay, perfect. So it has to make a hospital work.
I don't like what you're doing to me right now.
I know. I'm not even a socialist. See how easy it is? To make a hospital work and to make education work. So like in education, right? When you go into a hospital, like, is it dark? How do you get? What do you go in there? What is it? Can you see things?
You need power. You need some energy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And you need power for a school too.
Yeah.
Oh, so in order to make those things work, we need power to work. So it sounds like now we need to have cheap, affordable energy for everyone, right?
No.
What do you mean no?
I mean, you have to be able to. Someone has to pay for it.
Yeah, but we all have an interest in paying for it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Even the government that might abuse us, they want to have the power working, right?
Yeah.
So now we need. Okay, now we're getting to the fundamentals. So now think about all the things you need to make a power plant work, right? You need to build the power plant. You need concrete. You need copper. You need mining. You need people to do these things. You need engineers that also need education. So there's always feedback loops. Right?
Yeah, except we're going to pay me pennies. You're going to pay me pennies on the dollar to build all that.
But you don't need to do that because everyone needs it now. Are there certain people who like their jobs? Like, are there people you've ever met? They like being a welder. They like being a plumber. They like being a electrician. There you go. That's how you do it, right? I like teaching, so I would work as an educator. I could do that job. I'm doing this right now. I'm talking to you. I'm not getting paid for this. So there are things that you would do. So for instance, you might disagree. Do you need incentive to raise are you getting paid to raise your children?
Yes.
Who's paying you?
State.
For what?
To have kids.
Well, most people don't get paid to have children. Are you taking care of your children?
Yeah, you do. You pay taxes. You get paid.
No.
They give you money to have kids.
It makes it easier to have children. But like, if you got paid no money, would you want to have children?
Oh, no. It takes money for sure.
Yeah, you need money. You work a job. But I'm saying, like, if you could take care of children on your own, you don't need anyone else to give you money to raise your children.
No, as I'm saying, you need money to raise kids.
But the government doesn't pay you money to raise your children.
Yeah, every time we pay taxes, they give you money. You say, how many dependents do you have?
You're being stupid right now. So
how am I being stupid?
Money, I don't have a family.
I'm being
so
dependent.
Like, the point is, like,
so you don't get paid. You don't get paid what I get paid.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think I make more money than you. So just because you make money doesn't mean you're going to raise a family, right?
Well,
what made you want to have kids? Money?
The money.
That makes no sense. Well, I don't know what program you're in, but most people just go like, oh, I want to have children, right? So it's like, why do you have 2 children or 3 children? Or why do some people have more? Because they just want to have more or less children, right?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So then, like,
but I also heard I've actually heard the opposite too. I've heard other ways when they go, I'm going to have. I know people that said, I'm going to have kids so I can get money.
I get that, but here's another thing about anarcho-communism and Marx and socialism, like with capitalism. It's not saying it's a perfect world. Are there people who will take advantage of the system? Yeah. Are there people taking advantage of the system right now? So it's like, it's the same problem. It's like, what's a better system? Like, what's more moral? That's another thing that's very difficult for people to accept. It's like, are there rich people who screw people over and pollute the world and don't care about regular people in our capitalistic system? Yeah. So saying that there's going to be problems in a Marxist or socialist system is like, you're just trading problems, but you haven't made new problems. You've just change the problems that you're going to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't like what you're doing. So we're going to end this. MamDanny strikes again.
Yeah, I told you I'm good at this. It's very appealing. I learned it, but I'll argue against it in a minute. So
there is no minute. We got to wrap this up.
Okay, well, I'll end it right now. But you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't like it.
So there are plenty of things people will do with that for not money.
I don't like what you did.
Self-motivated, and also people will help each other. If you saw someone bleeding on the street, more often.
No, money is incentive. Money creates creativity. Money creates innovation.
Not necessarily. Not
because it does.
Like, if that were true, all artists, not just the famous ones, would not work. But what's the stereotype of artists in our society? What are most artists? They're poor. I don't know if you've ever gone to LA and met any of them. They're just poor people. Why do they do it?
But their currency is different. They like the notoriety. Like, okay, well now
you're making an interesting segue. So that I think is also it's a good way of looking at it. But you'll notice it's not money. You're talking about social currency or status, but that's not money. So the counter to this isn't so much that the Marxists aren't onto something. I don't think the money incentive actually makes sense. The money incentive makes sense for things that no one's interested in. So for instance, okay.
You don't want to go on vacation?
Huh?
You don't want to go on vacation? You don't want to buy cool things?
This is what I'm saying. I'm tell you. And this is also a problem with our society because you're right. This also frustrates capitalism. The jobs in our society that should make more money don't make the most money. Amazon's a good job. Jeff Bezos was on to something. That's a good thing. But what's more important? Getting a package or a sanitation worker?
Well, sanitation.
More important.
Yeah.
But they don't get paid as much as Jeff Bezos. So that's a good criticism. But I don't think that's a result of capitalism. That's a result of human nature. We determine what things are valuable. So Kim Kardashian can make more money than a person who works in the sanitation department, but the sanitation department's way more important than Kim Kardashian. Marxists will say that's a problem with capitalism. I would argue that's a problem with human nature, right? So to your point about the artists, many of them don't trade in currency already. That's why many of them end up being left-leaning and don't like capitalism or money because they have this self-importance. They should think they should be more important than they are. But the point is, they continue to do art not for the social status, maybe for the social status, but because they enjoy doing it. But people also want both. They want to enjoy what they're doing, like with me, and I also want to be a huge social media celebrity, right? You want both. Because you want people to see what you're doing, and you want to be good at what you're doing, right? If you're just a great artist in a room by yourself, then you're not a great artist. You need the interpersonal relationships to be good at something, right? I can be the best artist in the world. I can have a room upstairs that's like the most mind-blowing art. If no one sees it, I'm not the best artist in the world.
All right, we got 3 minutes.
All right. So the pushback to this then is that in these socialistic systems where the government becomes more and more controlled, there's a practical problem. The practical problem is that when people acquire power, they don't give up power, right? So that's why communism doesn't work or socialism doesn't work, is that now, even though it's supposed to be for the people, that only lasts for about 10 minutes at a time. Because as soon as you give people power, they don't care about the people anymore. They care about themselves. So that's problem number one. Problem number two comes from the libertarians. Even if it were the case that socialism could possibly work, where the government could work on behalf of the people, the advantage of capitalism is it's decentralized. So, for instance, you have all these little companies and they're addressing supply and demand and wants and desires, right? You cannot centralize all that information. Anytime you centralize control in what we call a government or a state, it becomes inefficient. That is why you give one-size-fit-all answers that don't fit everybody. That's why, like, even though we don't want to see all this stuff right now, my understanding is when you look at Canada and when you look at in England, their socialized medicine system is going bankrupt because, to your point about the money incentive, there's no incentive for these hospitals and health infrastructure to be run more efficiently because the government's going to pay for it anyways, right? So the problem we have in this country is that we actually argue about how to make healthcare better. The left-leaning people think going towards socialism is better because the people don't have enough money for the healthcare, right? But the right-of-center people, and I also think, again, I'm more biased, they're onto something, which is that it's the regulation and the subsidies from the government that cause healthcare to be too expensive. Now we have a problem because who's right? You can be an economist and prove it, but even if you could prove it, you got to convince the people who think that you can be more socialistic because they're disagreeing on human nature. So my answer is always the more liberal answer, which is like things like vouchers. Here's money, make a decision for yourself, right? Here's some social safety net. It's not going to be enough to cover your entire life, but it's enough to be like, consider your moral worth and not let you die in a ditch, right? Will some people abuse that system and waste that money? Yeah, yes, they will. But many other people will behave correctly and use that money the best way that they can. It'll still have problems, but the advantage will be I can make my mistakes or succeed by my own decisions, not from the government telling me what to do.
That's what I like. We're gonna end on that because that's why the whole reason I like. I want no government telling me what to do.
Yeah, but is it because you just don't like the government or because you don't think it's going to work?
I just never liked anyone telling me what to do. That's why.
Right. But if it worked, I think you might change your mind. I think it's impossible for it to work. I don't trust human nature enough. And also, I don't think, even if human nature were good, the people in the government or my fellow citizens don't know what's good for me as best as I do. So I need the political space to make decisions for myself and my family as best as I can. Because I know those things. I live with myself every day. I know the things that are good for me. I don't need some third party coming in and telling me what they think is good for me.
That's what I'm talking about. We're out of here. Life hacks. Subscribe. Comment. Agree with MamDanny over here. I hate what you did because I almost liked it. But
yeah, almost. I'll talk about it more next time.
No, we won't.
Hacks.